Hi everyone, my name is Angus Yeoman, and today I want to talk to you about a storm that not only affected my life, but affected the lives of millions of people across the Atlantic coast of North America. That storm is 2012's Hurricane Sandy. Now before I talk about Hurricane Sandy itself, I think it would be best to understand what a hurricane is in general. Now basically, a hurricane is a rotating low-pressure system, or cyclone, that forms in the tropical and sometimes subtropical waters of the Atlantic Ocean. And to be considered a hurricane, the storm must have sustained winds of over 74 miles per hour. Now, hurricanes can technically occur in any tropical waters in any part of the world. However, it might go by a different name depending on where they occur. In the Western Pacific, for example, hurricanes are referred to as typhoons. In the Indian Ocean, they're cyclones. But in the Atlantic, they're hurricanes. Furthermore, hurricanes are measured upon the Saffir-Simpson scale, which classifies hurricanes based upon their sustained wind velocity, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. Now, Sandy, like every other hurricane, actually started its life off the coast of West Africa. And like every other hurricane, it started its life as a tropical wave on or around October 11th, 2012. A tropical wave is basically a large grouping of thunderstorms that forms in the tropics and sometimes subtropic waters of the Atlantic. The reason being is that the warm water of the tropics, especially the deep warm water near the coast of Africa, allow for tremendous heating and uplifting of moisture into clouds, which then turn into events such as these disturbances that basically creates the perfect conditions for large thunderstorms. And this system, especially in the case of our soon-to-be hurricane, can actually resemble a line or a wave of thunderstorms that move simultaneously in a given direction. In the case of Sandy, the system lay dormant for a few days due to unfavorable development conditions until easterly winds coming from mainland Africa, as well as low barometric pressure, actually fed energy into the system and caused it to begin the journey across the Atlantic Ocean. By the 20th of October, Sandy was upon the Caribbean islands, and wind conditions, including low wind shear, were perfect for development of the storm. On the night of the 22nd, hurricane hunters from NOAA observed winds of 40 miles per hour in a rain band that was forming apart from the center of circulation. As a result of this, the National Hurricane Center named the storm Sandy and classified it as Tropical Storm Sandy. Then, on the morning of the 24th, when Sandy was south of Jamaica, an eye began forming in Sandy's center, and the hurricane hunters observed sustained winds of 99 miles per hour, which prompted the NHC to classify Sandy as a hurricane. Later that night, around 7 p.m., now Hurricane Sandy made landfall near Kingston, Jamaica as a Category 1 hurricane. Interestingly, the island's topography didn't seem to slow or weaken Sandy at all. In fact, Sandy even grew stronger as it passed over the Cayman Trench and its warm, deep water. On the 25th, Sandy impacted Cuba as a Category 3 hurricane with sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. As the storm was passing over the Bahamas, it was briefly downgraded to a tropical storm. However, convection led to re-strengthening of Sandy, and she was reclassified as a hurricane once again. It was then that Hurricane Sandy began traveling up the Atlantic coast of the United States. On the night of October 29th, 2012, Hurricane Sandy, which was declared extratropical earlier that day, made landfall in Brigantine, New Jersey. Sustained winds were recorded at 80 miles per hour and gusts up to 100 miles per hour. Waves off of New Jersey's coast were recorded to be as tall as 24 feet by offshore buoys, and a storm surge of 8 feet led to widespread flooding in many of the region's coastal towns. Furthermore, a record was set for the lowest observed barometric pressure in a state north of North Carolina. This was 945 millibars. Then Governor Chris Christie enforced an evacuation of all barrier islands on the Jersey Shore on October 28th, and for good reason. Destruction along the coast ended up being almost unimaginable. Many beaches were narrowed by 30 feet or more, and houses were ripped from their foundations, with sand and water taking their place. In Maniloking, 2 new inlets were formed from immense inundation by the waves, and water rose to 13 feet above the average low tide, which ended up placing the high water mark at 9 feet. After what felt like an eternity, Sandy moved westward towards Pennsylvania, where, for one last time, she was downgraded from hurricane status. While over the Appalachians, blizzard warnings were issued, and some areas experienced heavy snowfall. Sandy then moved northwards towards Ontario, Canada, where she dissipated when she finally met up with another low-pressure system. To make matters worse for the areas affected, relief efforts were dampened by a nor'easter that struck 10 days after landfall, which blanketed the state with snow and freezing temperatures. Millions of people were left without power for days after the storm, and a few 100,000 were left without power for weeks. Additionally, some New Jersey residents, my friends, were unable to return to their homes on the barrier islands until the spring of 2013. To this day, empty lots where beach houses once stood serve as ghostly reminders to the costliest hurricane that this state has ever seen. Thank you for listening to this part of New Jersey history, to this part of my history, and to this part of our history.